should you take anything that it says in the Bible seriously? Well, not without objectively testable corroboratory evidence, just like anything else. But Eric Lyons, he seems to think otherwise. Why? Because he's out of his ever-loving mind. Let me ask you a serious question. What do you think of Eric Lyons? Because the more of his videos that I see, both from his own Apologetics Press channel and the World Video Bible School, he really comes off as an ignorant, fanatical lunatic without the capacity for self-reflection. He actually believes this crap unironically. So today, we're going to look at a video on atheism and why atheists, according to him, reject belief in his God. Well, it's actually because there's no evidence, but, Eric seems to think that there is. He just has no clue what evidence actually is. So let's go watch.
Human beings can do many amazing things.
And many not so amazing things. Like believe irrational things for entirely emotional reasons and wall off that part of themselves from any kind of rational evaluation, even if, in general, they'd be able to think critically about the ideas in their heads. And that's why I refer to religion as a mind poison. It fundamentally changes how a person evaluates the world when viewed through a religious lens. It damages the critical faculties of otherwise intelligent, well-educated people and turns them from, here's the well-evidenced reasons why I accept this as true and do, well, it's true because I want it to be. And that's nothing to be proud of.
Some can run 26.2 miles without stopping. Others show remarkable courage in the face of great danger. Some can walk along a tightrope hundreds of feet above the ground. But there are certain things that are humanly impossible.
Maybe. And one of those, I've come to realize, is convincing someone that has been infected by religious mind poison to set it aside and evaluate their emotionally held beliefs critically. It's why most debates with the religious go absolutely nowhere. They are incapable of stepping back and getting out of their religious headspace and just looking at the objective evidence to see what it says about the things that they really wish were true. It's not a failing of just the religious, but it absolutely is one of many, many places where they go horribly wrong.
Humans cannot walk on water unassisted.
No, they can't. But they can write stories about humans walking on water. They can make up farcical fairy tales about people doing things that people simply cannot do, just because it lends some kind of crazy credence to their unsupportable beliefs. Or is this not where you were going with this?
Humans can't give sight to the blind, instantly reattach severed ears with only their hands, or raise the dead.
Nope. But they can write stories that claim that they did, because it's funny that none of these stories have any actual, objectively verifiable evidence that the events recorded ever actually happened in reality. But the religious, those guys with the mental poison coursing through their veins, they aren't interested in whether or not these emotionally comforting fairy tales are accurate or reliable, so long as they make them feel good. So you get people like Eric here who want to insist that the silly stories in his book of mythology actually happened without doing anything but flapping their lips to prove it. Not sure why anyone is supposed to take him at all seriously.
If ever such a person existed, his life would logically testify to the existence of a supernatural being.
If you could, actually prove that he did any of that. Now, how do you suppose that you're going to do that? I mean, other than pointing at a book of mythology and pretending that it's reliable, Oh, wait. That's all you're going to do, isn't it? And you wonder why people laugh at you.
Unbelievers understand the rationality of this argument. In fact, prominent atheist Dan Barker is on record as saying, if Jesus were to materialize and work any number of miraculous deeds, atheism, he indicated, would be disproven, and theism would be established as a fact.
And that's true. Now, if only you could get Jesus to appear and do some scientifically demonstrable miracles. Exactly how do you propose to accomplish this mighty feat, Eric? Because if you notice, Dan said if. If Jesus showed up. If Jesus could be shown to do miracles. If. You don't get to pretend that Jesus has demonstrably shown up or done any of it. Your wishful thinking doesn't matter.
The truth is, the very proof that Barker and other atheists postulate was provided 2,000 years ago when God put on flesh and came to earth in the form of man.
And you're wrong. Those are claims, Eric, not demonstrable facts, not objectively verifiable events. Claims made by a bunch of ignorant and primitive people living in the middle of nowhere. It doesn't matter if you like those ideas or if you, for some bizarre reason, believe those ideas. That doesn't make those ideas true. And this is exactly what I predicted that he would do, because he really can't do anything else. But of course, he's not making this video for us, is he? He's not calling up Dan Barker and telling him that all of the evidence that he requires has already been provided. Nope. This is just to make believers happy because they aren't going to ask any hard questions and they're certainly not going to expect any objective evidence. They just blindly believe, just like Eric does. And he wonders why we just shake our heads when one of his videos comes on.
And he didn't merely claim to be God. He did what a reasonable person could expect if God were ever to prove his divinity on earth.
Just like Darth Vader did when he proved the power of the Sith. All of the evidence you could ever need is in the Star Wars movies. Go watch them for yourself. Because that's exactly what's going on here. He's effectively watching a fantasy movie and pretending like everything that happened in it is real. And the rest of us are sitting here going, are you out of your mind? And the answer to that is yes. Yes, he is.
He fulfilled precise prophecies and worked supernatural miracles, including coming back from the dead himself.
Well, those are the stories. Of course, you're completely overselling them because none of that stands up to any critical scrutiny whatsoever. Or, Harry Potter proved that he was the chosen one by doing magic and defeating Voldemort. It says so in a series of 7 books. It's funny that the religious get really, really mad when we bring up these movie and book references because I think on some level, they know just how accurate it really is. They don't like it, but somewhere in their addled minds, they know that it's all true.
The life and works of Jesus testify to the existence of a supernatural being.
The stories, written down by anonymous authors thousands of years ago without any objective evidence presented to support them, make claims about things that you are emotionally invested in, which is why you buy into any of this laughable rot. You also reject the same kinds of stories written in other books of mythology by other, usually anonymous authors, because it doesn't stroke your ego, which just proves conclusively that you're an irrational fool, Eric. Anyone surprised? I know I'm not.
A few years ago, renowned atheist Dr. Richard Dawkins was questioned in Australia on national television about his unbelief in God. Specifically, he was asked, "What proof would change your mind?" He quickly responded by saying, "That is a very difficult and interesting question because, I used to think that if somehow, great, big, giant, 900-foot-high Jesus with a voice like Paul Robeson suddenly strode in and said, 'I exist,' and here I am. But even that, I actually sometimes wonder if that would... And then he was interrupted.
And he's right. Now, of course, you can compare that to someone like Ken Ham, who, in a debate with Bill Nye in 2014, said very clearly, no one is ever going to convince me that the Word of God is not true. Now, my own response to this question is very simple. If God is all-knowing, then he'd know for a fact what would change my mind. If he wanted me to know that he existed, then I would know that he existed. And as I am not currently convinced that he exists, then I must conclude one of two things. Either I have no reason whatsoever to think that this God of yours exists, or God doesn't want me to believe. And hey, who am I to argue with God in the latter case?
So, though Dr. Dawkins raises the possibility of the legitimacy of disproving atheism with a 900-foot-high hypothetical Jesus, he's rejected the historical, miracle-working, resurrected from the dead Jesus who walked the earth 2,000 years ago.
Because that hasn't been proven to have ever happened, period. I don't know why Eric has such a mental block regarding this, but that's the truth. And you notice how he phrases this. It's not about proving Christianity, because as far as he's concerned, Christianity is already true and it doesn't really make a difference. It makes him feel good, so it can't possibly be wrong. No, it's about disproving atheism, which proves, once again, that he's got no clue what atheism even is. He, like most theists, thinks that we are just like he is. Desperate to believe, having faith, looking for something to fill an imaginary God-shaped hole in our metaphorical hearts. And he's wrong. We are nothing like that. We're rational. This isn't some kind of asinine dick-waving contest between atheism and Christianity. This is a quest to find factual truth, based on the best evidence that we have at hand. Atheism has all of it, and Christianity has none. So they just have to pretend.
Sadly, such unreasonable unbelief is nothing new.
Except it isn't unreasonable. Now, I could say the same thing about Eric here. He doesn't believe the claims of Scientology. Why? Well, it would be nice to say that he's looked at their claims, sought out any objectively verifiable and testable evidence that they have to support them, and then rationally evaluated whether or not the claims stand up to any kind of critical scrutiny. But let's be honest, he hasn't done any of that. That would require work. He'd have to think about it. He'd have to care about reality, and clearly he doesn't give a damn. No, the reason he rejects Scientology is because it disagrees with his pre-existing beliefs. He assumes, based on blind faith, that what he currently believes is true, thus everything else is, by definition, wrong. No intellect required, and that's a good thing because people like Eric Lyons are clearly not very good at exercising their intellect.
Even some in the very presence of Jesus in the first century who testified to the supernatural feats that he worked rejected him.
Stories. Tales in a book. Honestly, Eric, do you want me to just pull out other religious books and read from those? Because they spout the same kind of nonsense that Eric's does. But he likes his and not the others, so he just ignores theirs because, fifis. Homer's cyclic epics tell the story of the Trojan War, something that we now have pretty good evidence actually happened. That doesn't mean that all of the crazy writings about gods and goddesses are reliable or true. He would be able to apply that thinking to other works, but he can't do it to his own. Wonder why?
Even though they admitted to the many miracles that he worked, they plotted to put him to death.
And the Ministry of Magic opposed Harry Potter because they were being influenced by Voldemort. There isn't any significant difference between the two.
I suppose it shouldn't be surprising that many will reject the Lord God today, despite the evidence for his existence.
Despite the non-existent evidence for anything. Because Eric, like all of his apologetic brethren, has no clue what evidence actually is. He thinks that it's anything that convinces him, someone who already believes in the veracity of Christian beliefs, that Christian beliefs are true. And that's absolutely and absurdly circular. When you think that you are the sole arbiter over whether or not something is true, it's no wonder you get pretty much everything wrong. It's like asking the Scientologist for evidence of Scientology, and they say that just because they underwent some auditing and felt better afterwards, well, somehow that proves that it's all absolutely true. Except it doesn't. It's why we are very clear about what we are asking for. We want objective evidence, proof that goes beyond your feelings or opinions. We don't care about those things. We don't care what it says in your book. We care if you can prove that your book is true. And you simply can't do that. The Upanishads and the Vedas say the same kinds of things that it does in the Bible. Christians reject those because it doesn't fit in with their very emotional worldview. And that is a childish, immature way of looking at reality. We want to tear them apart, look at the component pieces, and evaluate whether these things that are written down have any demonstrable evidence for their existence. I don't want to hear about stories of Jesus any more than you want to hear about stories of Harry Potter. I want you to produce demonstrable evidence that Jesus, the Jesus that you believe, the Jesus that is written down in the Bible, actually existed. And if you can't do it, then I have no more reason to take your belief seriously than I do the claims of crazy Potterheads. But because people like Eric can't get that through their tiny little addled brains, there is something severely wrong with their mental processes. Think about it. It's just sad.